look different if they have the same parents. And so I can show you this by thinking about 3 genes. And we can imagine that these 3 genes are on 3 separate chromosomes. Okay, so we're going to look at 3 genes. We're going to look at one gene that is a real human gene for eye color. We're going to look at one gene that is sort of a real human gene that has to do with hair color. And then we're going to use one that is completely made up, and that's going to be the trinosy gene. All right? So we're going to look at 2 individuals here. We're going to look at a biological parent that's male, biological parent that's female, and we're going to say that the 2 alleles that the dad has are blue eyes and blue eyes for eye color. We're going to say that for hair color, the dad has 1 brown hair allele and 1 blonde hair allele. And then for the trinosy gene, the dad is going to have 1 nose and 1 3 nose alleles. Okay? And then the mom, let's give ourselves a little bit more room here. The mom is going to have 1 brown eye and 1 blue-eyed allele. She's going to have 1 brown and 1 blonde allele, and she's going to have trinosy. So she's got 2 3-nose alleles. Okay. Now in this case, we've got 2 alleles, 2 possible alleles for each of our genes. For eye color, we could either be blue or brown, and in real life, brown would be the dominant allele. And for hair color, we've got brown and blonde, and it's a little bit more complicated because there's more than one gene that actually determines hair color. But we'll keep things simple, and we'll say that brown hair is the dominant allele, and then we'll say, just like in the made-up example that you all worked on yesterday, or Thursday, let's say that having 1 nose is the dominant trait. Okay, so I'm gonna do some meta-analysis here. I'm gonna step back for a second, and what I want you all to think about is there was a question that was asked. I laid out some stuff here. I'm not done answering this question yet, but I laid out some stuff. If you were to present something like this to me, it would be very clear to me. This written evidence that's up here right now is reasonably clear. There's no vocabulary here because I'm kind of talking through this, but if you could add a little bit more information, it would be very clear that you understand what a gene is. It would be very clear that you understand what an allele is and how it relates to a gene. It would be very clear that you understand that humans are diploid organisms, which means we have pairs of genes. We might have the same allele, or we might have 2 different alleles. And I've brought up the idea of dominant and recessive. I haven't said what happens there, but you all know that I could make this prediction, but now I'm going to engage in the conversation. So I'm going to ask you all to contribute here by thinking about genotype versus phenotype. Okay, so I'm going to ask first, what is the genotype of the dad? And before you answer, so this would be like if this were a one-on-one conversation, I would just be asking you, oh, well, what's the genotype of the dad? And then I would expect you to give me an answer. For this, It's all of you. It's not really a conversation. I'm asking a question and you're on camera, which means if you're not comfortable having your voice show up on Canvas, or if you're not supposed to have your voice show up on Canvas, please don't answer. If you're okay having your voice show up and you've had the permission slip signed to have videos posted, you're welcome to answer this. What is the genotype of the dad for eye color? Anybody?
Blue.
What's that? Say it again.
Me?
Anybody? Yeah.
Blue.
Blue and blue, and we have some terminology for that. We have some genetics vocabulary.
Big B.
It's homozygous.
It's homozygous. Dominant.
Oh.
Brown is dominant.
Recessive.
So dad is homozygous, recessive. That's dad's genotype. And what about dad's phenotype? What color eyes would dad have? Blue, right? So dad's eyes would be blue. Now, I'm not going to write this for everything because we've got other stuff to do, but we could go down the list. And again, so that was a little bit of engagement. That's the kind of thing that I would expect you to be able to tell me. And now that you've seen that, I would also expect that you could say, Mom is heterozygous for eye color. She will have brown eyes. That's her phenotype. Dad's genotype for hair color is heterozygous. It's phenotype, brown hair. Same with mom. Dad's genotype for trinosy is heterozygous. His phenotype would be single-nosed. Mom's genotype for trinosy is homozygous recessive. She would be trinosed.
So she has 3 noses?
She has 3 noses. And it specifies that they're not side by side. They're stacked up on each other. Just don't, that's not, we don't judge by appearance. If somebody happens to have 3 noses stacked up on top of each other, it's all good. We saw those pictures of the Habsburgs yesterday, right? Like the Habsburgs had big jaws and big noses. You don't laugh at people because of how they look, can you? All right, so we could go through and we could make genotypes and phenotypes from all of this stuff. We should, at this point, be able to create 3 pedigree charts, one for each of these traits. Okay, now we don't know how many kids these parents have. We don't know exactly what the kids would look like, but we could create 3 Punnett squares, and those Punnett squares could show the alleles that mom and dad could potentially contribute to an offspring for the eye color gene. We'd have another Punnett square for the hair color gene, and another Punnett square for the trinosy gene. So it would look like this. We're going to have 3 Punnett squares that we're thinking about. Each of them will have mom on the rows, and we'll have mom on the columns and dad on the rows. So dad's alleles are blue and blue for eye color, so we'll use a little b. That's not dad. We'll use a little b and a little b. Mom is heterozygous, so she has a big B and a little b. And this is where we get into, like, what is this Punnett square showing? It's showing that during meiosis, dad's pair of chromosomes with the eye color gene on them are going to split. There will be 4 gametes produced in meiosis. 2 of them will have this little b, 2 of them will have this little b. No matter what happens, dad's gametes are going to have a recessive allele for eye color. Mom, when she has a cell that undergoes meiosis, is going to produce 4 gametes. 2 of them will have the dominant allele, 2 of them will have the recessive allele. So half of mom's gametes will have the brown-eyed allele, half of mom's gametes will have the blue-eyed allele. When we complete the Punnett square, it tells us there's a 25% chance of offspring having 1, 2, 3, 4, any one of those 4 outcomes. Okay, so 2 of those outcomes end up resulting in an offspring that is heterozygous and has brown eyes. Two of those potential combinations result in the offspring having the homozygous recessive genotype and blue eyes. We're going to have something similar. I'm going to use the same letter, and ideally you all would be able to understand how it is that that these letters can be reused, because this is one gene. We're going to do the same thing for a different gene, but I can use the same letters. So both parents are heterozygous for hair color. So the four possible combinations that could show up in their offspring are one homozygous dominant, two heterozygous. So that means 75% of the time the offspring would have brown hair, and 25% of the time the offspring would have blonde hair. And then for trinosy, the dad has one dominant allele, and the mom has only recessive alleles. So there's a 50% chance that the child would have one nose, and a 50% chance that the child would have three noses. So what we can look at here is we can see that since these genes are all like splitting up during meiosis independently of each other, one of the things that's going to happen is that just because one particular offspring ends up with this combination doesn't mean that that offspring is also going to get this combination and this combination for the other two genes. So there's a 25% chance of landing in any one of these squares, which means one child could get this square, be recessive for eye color, recessive for hair color, recessive for trinosy. We could have a blonde-haired, blue-eyed, tri-nosed child. Neither parent is blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and three-nosed. And another sibling could be dominant for all three traits. Brown hair, brown eyes, single-nosed. And again, neither parent is brown hair, blonde-eyed, single-nosed. Dad has blue eyes, mom has three noses. So we've got at least two potential offspring that both look different from each other and from their parents. And it all comes from having multiple genes, and this is the simplest case where we're only looking at two alleles per gene, okay?